Shocking. What happened inside the royal courtyard left the entire kingdom speechless. A single whispered word shattered years of silence, forcing a royal guard to break every rule ever written. What he uncovered in those next few seconds was darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than anyone imagined. And now the palace is scrambling to hide the truth. Like the video and subscribe for the full story. In the old kingdom of Alderia, people like to say that danger shouted and heroes roared back. They were wrong. Danger often moved in silence, in lowered eyes and careful smiles. And sometimes, a hero stood very still, heard a single whispered word, and chose to move when everyone else remained frozen. Sergeant Rowan Thorne of the Royal Guard had learned that truth the hard way. The inner courtyard of Highcrest Palace lay wrapped in a pale winter light. Flags barely moved on their poles. Cameras on black tripods waited like patient insects along the far wall, their red lights dark for now. Stagehands adjusted cables. A pair of stewards argued quietly over the placing of a row of white chairs. The air smelled of wet stone and trimmed hedges. On a simple wooden platform at the center, a single microphone stood ready. This was no coronation, no grand parade. It was only a rehearsal for a small environmental event. Youth ambassadors, charity partners, and a short speech from the youngest royal child. Princess Charlotte of Alderia. She was 10 years old. Though people often forgot that when they saw the little sash across her coat or the way she curtsied on command. Today she wore a soft green coat dress and cream gloves that reached past her wrists. Her dark hair had been pulled into a neat braid that lay down her back like a ribbon of ink in her right hand. She held a card with one simple sentence about protecting forests and streams. Her words. Her moment at the foot of the steps that led to the platform. Sergeant Rowan Thorne stood at attention, rifle at his shoulder, boots rooted to the flagstones. The Royal Guard uniform had a way of swallowing the man inside it, turning him into part of the palace stone. But Rowan never forgot that he was a person first. He had served in real conflict before he ever wore this ceremonial coat. Desert heat in Karish, narrow streets in Fenholm, nights where the sky glowed orange with distant fire. He had seen what happened when people in power did not listen to small voices. He had spent enough years trying to make sure those small voices survived long enough to grow louder. Now his job, at least on paper, was simple. Guard the royal family. Obey protocol. Do not move unless ordered. The Queen of Alderia, Queen Corinna, stood off to one side beneath a pale awning. She watched the rehearsal with an expression that was almost kind, almost gentle, but not quite either. Advisors murmured near her elbow. A lady-in-waiting held a folder of schedules. Rowan saw all of this without turning his head. The trick of palace duty was to see everything and reveal nothing. Places everyone, called the event coordinator. We will run the sequence once more. Princess Charlotte, if you would stand by the steps, please. Charlotte did not skip. She did not smile. She walked toward the steps with a careful stiffness that did not fit her usual energy. Rowan noticed that first. He had watched her play on the lawns with her brothers and the children of staff, racing after a ball, laughing so hard she nearly fell over. This was a different child. Her shoulders were tight. Her free hand stayed close to her side. Something was wrong. Rowan allowed his gaze to soften for half a heartbeat as she approached. A tiny crease showed between her brows. As she came closer, he saw the edge of darkened skin above the line of her glove. A faint swelling near the inside of her elbow where the coat sleeve did not fall quite right. His jaw clenched. Bruises happen, he told himself. Children fall. They bump into things. But in his gut, something old and cold stirred. Princess Charlotte reached the bottom step. Protocol said she should pass the guard without acknowledgement, climb the steps, and take her place. She knew these rules. She had been raised on them. Instead, she slowed. For a moment, the entire courtyard seemed to shrink to the space between them. The chatter of technicians faded. The rustle of papers blurred into a distant hum. Rowan heard only the soft crunch of gravel under her polished shoes as she stepped close enough that he could see the shine of tears. She refused to let fall. She looked up at him. Her eyes were the clear gray of winter sky. Her lips moved. SOS, she whispered one word. No tears, no drama, no collapse. Just a code. Rowan felt his heart slam against his ribs. SOS was not a word the princess should ever use lightly, not even as a joke. It was part of a quiet system the palace had adopted for emergencies involving children and staff. A word for when someone could not speak openly. In training, they had walked through scenarios in calm classrooms. If a child says this, you alert the senior officer. You do not cause a scene. You do not act without clearance. That was the rule. Protocol was supposed to keep everyone safe, or at least that was what the manuals said, but manuals did not stand in cold. Courtyards and look into frightened eyes. Rowan forced himself to breathe once, slowly. He lowered his gaze as if simply acknowledging royalty, but in truth, he searched for more detail. As Charlotte lifted her foot to the first step, her sleeve shifted again. The swelling along her arm was clearer this time, a blotch of blue and yellow that had no place on such young skin. Your Highness, he said softly. The formal greeting for her station, she kept her face angled toward the stage, but her fingers tightened on the card until the paper bent. He heard the smallest catch in her breath. Rowan felt memory drag him backward for a moment. Another child, years ago, in a village half a world away. A boy who had stood in a doorway and stared at him with the same silent plea. Rowan had held position then because the order had been to wait, to focus on the main objective. Hours later, he had watched that same doorway crumble in dust and smoke. He had promised himself that he would never again let. Procedures speak louder than conscience, Sergeant. Thorne, the sharp whisper, came from Captain Elridge at the far edge of the courtyard. Rowan did not turn his head, but he knew that the captain had seen the princess pause. He knew that every camera on the far wall was now pointed their way for the rehearsal. Rowan had a choice. He could pretend he had heard nothing. He could let Princess Charlotte climb the steps, deliver her line about rivers and forests, and return to whatever waited for her behind those stone walls. Or he could move. His pulse roared in his ears. The entire structure of palace life pressed against him like an invisible hand, demanding stillness. Men had been dismissed for less than a broken formation. A royal guard who acted without orders risked more than a reprimand. He risked everything he had built since he left the battlefield behind. Charlotte reached the second step. He could still stop this quietly, still treat it as nothing. Her small shoulders trembled once, almost imperceptibly, and then held firm. Courage, he thought, does not always stand on a stage. Sometimes it walks past you and says one word under its breath. Rowan shifted his weight. A tiny movement, but in the rigid geometry of the royal guard, it was like cracking a statue. He stepped forward half a pace, breaking the perfect line he had been trained to maintain. Your Highness, he said again, a little louder, but still only for her. Are you in immediate danger? It was not protocol. He knew that. But he also knew that if she answered yes, and he had done nothing, he would never forgive himself. Charlotte did not look back. Eyes fixed ahead, she gave the smallest nod. That single, brave movement threw years of training into chaos. Rowan straightened, shoulders squared. His voice, when it came, carried farther than he intended. Captain Elridge. He called, still formal, still controlled, but with an edge that made a few technicians turn their heads. I request immediate child safety protocol. Code Silver. Gasps fluttered across the courtyard. Code Silver was no longer a quiet rehearsal term. It was the alarm that could halt any event, no matter who watched. Queen Corinna's head snapped toward him, eyes sharp, mouth parting in disbelief. Rowan felt dozens of gazes crash against him. He had broken the calm. He had broken the script, and for the first time in his career as a royal guard. Sergeant Rowan Thorne realized that he had just stepped into a battle where the enemy did not carry weapons, and the wounds would not show on any official camera. Whatever came next. There was no turning back. For a heartbeat after Rowan spoke, the courtyard froze. Sound fell away. The word silver hung in the air like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Then everything moved at once. Captain Elridge strode forward, his face tight with controlled fury. The technicians near the cameras exchanged startled glances, hands stopping in mid-adjustment. A steward almost dropped a stack of programs. Somewhere above, a pigeon burst from the herb garden wall. Beating its wings in frantic circles, Princess Charlotte stood on the second step. Small and very still, her gloved hand gripping the rail. She had followed the rules she knew best: do not cause trouble on purpose. Yet she had also done something that required more bravery than any speech. She had asked for help. "Sergeant Thorne," Captain Elridge said, voice low but sharp. "You will explain that call at once." Rowan did not bow his head. He met his superior's gaze with calm that cost him more effort than any parade march. "Your Highness used the distress code," Rowan said. "I observed visible injury to her arm. Child safety protocol requires immediate response. Code Silver." Elridge flicked a look toward the princess. That brief glance was enough. Charlotte kept her face forward, but her shoulders had drawn even tighter, as if she tried to fold herself inward. Her left sleeve sat oddly where it met her glove, small puff that hinted at swelling beneath. Elridge had children of his own. The lines at the corners of his eyes deepened. "Very well," he said. "Security med unit to the courtyard. Now." From the archway that led toward the inner corridor to palace, medics moved at a brisk walk, carrying discreet black cases marked with a silver crest. A third figure trotted beside them, tapping into a small handheld device that linked to internal palace systems. Queen Corinna stepped away from her awning. The faint kindness that guests sometimes praised in her expression had vanished. In its place stood a cool, almost clinical displeasure. "This is a rehearsal," she said. Her voice carried across the stones with the ease of long practice. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" Rowan heard the question, but he kept his eyes trained just to the right of the queen, as regulation demanded. Speaking directly to her without invitation tested the limits of his orders. He did not care for his own sake. But now any misstep could draw fire away from the real issue and toward his defiance instead. Captain Elridge answered. "Your Majesty, Sergeant Thorne reports that Her Highness used the SOS code and may be injured. I have activated Code Silver as procedure dictates." The Queen's gaze slid from the captain to the princess, then to Rowan. For a moment, Rowan thought she might dismiss the entire matter with a gesture. She held that power. Within these walls, her word could decide what counted as truth. Before she spoke, another voice broke through. "Silver was never intended for rehearsal games," said Lady Morell Ashford, the Queen's longtime confidant and advisor. She glided from the shade like a shadow shaped into human form, silken dark coat trailing slightly behind her. "This will alarm staff, upset schedules, and invite speculation that we cannot afford." Rowan heard the word games and felt something hot rise behind his ribs. He forced his hands to remain steady on his rifle. "With respect," Lady Elridge replied, "the code exists for one reason only. If a child uses it, we must take it seriously. That is non-negotiable." Princess Charlotte finally turned her head just enough to look at the nearest medic. Her eyes carried a mixture of fear and relief. That fragile thread of trust felt like a physical weight in Rowan's chest. The shorter medic, a woman with steady brown hands and a badge reading Dr. Lena Vale, bowed quickly to the Queen. "Your Majesty, with your permission?" "I would like to examine the princess in private," she said. "Only routine checks. We will be discreet." Silence stretched again. The entire courtyard seemed to watch the Queen's face as if it were the sky before a storm. Then Corinna smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "Of course," she said. "Anything for the health of my granddaughter. However, this alarm need not become a spectacle. Captain Elridge, clear all non-essential staff from the courtyard. Cameras off." Lady Morell stepped slightly closer to the Queen. The movement looked casual, but Rowan saw the way her fingers tightened around the tablet she carried. "We should also suspend access for any external visitors who work near the royal nursery wing," Morell added smoothly, "until we confirm that no misunderstanding has occurred." Rowan heard that word again, misunderstanding. Convenient shape that could cover almost any sin. The medics guided Princess Charlotte carefully down from the step. She hesitated, then looked up at Rowan. For the first time since she had spoken to him, He allowed himself a small, reassuring nod. "You are safe," he said quietly. "They will take care of you now." Charlotte's lips parted as if she wished to answer, but Dr. Vale gently touched her shoulder and led her toward the inner archway. The second medic flanked them on the outer side, creating a small shield of bodies as they passed. Rowan saw the injury clearly for the first time. The edge of the glove had slipped, exposing a band of bruised skin, dark and uneven. The sight struck him like a blow. This was no simple bump against a doorframe. This pattern suggested fingers, pressure, restraint. His vision narrowed for a moment. A faint humming started in his ears. He swallowed hard and forced his attention outward again. Queen Corinna watched the small procession leave, then turned back to Captain Elridge. "When this is over, I expect a complete report," she said. "For now, reset the courtyard. The event must proceed as planned this weekend. We cannot indulge every anxious reaction." Rowan saw Lady Morell's eyes flick briefly toward him. In that glance, he read calculation. She had the look of someone who measured people like chess pieces, counting squares between them and the throne. "Sergeant Thorne," Elridge said, turning at last, "you have triggered a major protocol in front of royal staff, media crew, and Her Majesty herself. Until we receive medical confirmation, you are relieved from courtyard duty. Surrender your position to Guard Hale and report to Security Office 3. The words landed with the dull weight of a hammer blow. Removal from post carried formal consequences. Rumors would spread faster than any official statement. Rowan stepped back from the base of the steps. He passed his rifle to the younger guard, who hurried over, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and dread. "Yes, sir," Rowan answered. His voice remained level. "Request permission to add one line to the record, Captain." Elridge hesitated, then gave a curt nod. Rowan drew in a slow breath. There were moments when a man could decide exactly who he intended to be, no matter who listened. "For the report," Rowan said, loud enough that several nearby staff heard him, "I confirm that I acted because a child asked for help. I do not regret that decision." A ripple of tension moved through the watching circle. A sound like a half-stifled gasp reached him from somewhere near the camera row. The Queen's expression hardened. Lady Morell's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Noted," Elridge said. "Now go." Rowan turned and walked toward the inner doors. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the palace stone tried to pull him back into silence. Yet under that weight, something inside him had never felt stronger. Behind him, staff began to move chairs again. Cameras powered down with soft clicks. The courtyard tried to return to its rehearsed calm, but the story of what had just happened had already started to travel. A whisper here, a hurried text there, a quiet remark in a staff corridor. A royal guard had broken formation for a princess's single whispered SOS. By the time Rowan reached Security Office 3, the palace itself seemed to hum with questions. In one room, a child sat with a medic and tried to explain why she had spoken that code. In another, advisors discussed damage control and reputations. And in a small, windowless office lined with monitors, Sergeant Rowan Thorne prepared to face the first formal challenge to his choice, unaware that his refusal to ignore one quiet plea would soon divide the entire kingdom. Security. Office 3 sat deep inside the palace, far from the sunlight of the courtyard and the ceremonial halls that tourists love to photograph. Down here, the walls were thick, the floors plain, and the air carried the faint hum of cooling vents and old wiring. It was a place built for order, evaluation, and discipline. A place where emotions were expected to remain invisible. Sergeant Rowan Thorne stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He removed his gloves, placed them neatly on the edge of the metal desk, and took the seat he had sat in only twice in 7 years, once for a promotion review, and once after a minor procedural dispute that had ended with apologies all around. This time the atmosphere felt different. Heavy. Pressured. He leaned back slightly, and let his eyes drift to the monitor on the far wall. The screen flickered with feeds from various palace cameras, corridors, stairwells, the north gate, the west garden. Nothing unusual. But Rowan had walked the palace grounds long enough to know that danger often hid in places the cameras did not reach. He thought of Princess Charlotte's whisper, the small tremble in her breath, the bruising he had seen. The memory cut through him sharper than any reprimand could. He had made his choice because a child needed someone to believe her. What followed now was only consequence. The office door opened. Captain Elridge entered, his posture firm but not hostile. Behind him walked Miss Priya Dane, the palace's lead internal investigator, calm woman with dark hair pulled into a tidy knot and a tablet tucked under her arm. She had the expression of someone who liked truth more than politics. Rowan respected her for that. "Sergeant Thorne," Elridge said, "we will begin preliminary questioning." Rowan stood, saluted, then sat when the captain gestured. Ms. Dane took the seat opposite, set her tablet on the table, and folded her hands on top of it. "For the record," she said, her voice steady, "this is an internal inquiry into the activation of Code Silver in the South Courtyard at 9:30 this morning. I would like you to recount the events as you experienced them. Please speak clearly and without abbreviation." Rowan nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Begin when Princess Charlotte approached your position." He recited the sequence carefully. Her walk, her tension, the swelling on her arm, the whisper, her nod. He described how she had not raised her voice, how she had kept her face composed, how her controlled fear had been far worse to witness than panic would have been. "Ms. Dane typed as he spoke, her fingers moving quick and precise. Captain Elridge listened with his arms folded, forehead creased. "And you confirm she spoke the distress code," Miss Dane said. Double quotes, "Yes," Rowan answered. "Clear as any word I have ever heard." "She said so? And you observed an injury?" "Yes." Rowan forced himself to remain neutral. "Significant bruising along the inner arm." "And based on this observation, you activated Code Silver?" "I did," Rowan replied. "The code exists to protect minors in immediate distress. She used it. My response followed procedure." Ms. Dane paused her typing. "Procedure also states that a guard must assess the situation discreetly before escalating to Code Silver. Your escalation occurred rather quickly. Can you explain your reasoning?" Rowan exhaled slowly. The princess looked afraid. She hid it well, but fear was present. She signaled directly. In my judgment, she required immediate assistance. Hesitation might have caused more harm. Elridge shifted. "Sergeant, you understand that a Code Silver triggers full lockdown of specific palace sectors. It disrupts schedules and raises alarm. It is a serious decision." "I understand, sir," Rowan said. "But a bruise on a royal child is also serious. And her code word leaves no room for doubt." Ms. Dane studied him for a moment long enough to decide whether he spoke with conviction or with defiance. "You believe she was harmed intentionally?" she said at last. Rowan hesitated. He could not accuse without evidence. He also could not lie. "I believe the injury did not look accidental, and I believe she was frightened." Elridge and Ms. Dane exchanged a quiet glance. Rowan caught the meaning. They were not questioning whether he had acted, but who would bear the political cost of his action. The door opened again. This time, Senior Advisor Lady Morell Ashford stepped inside, gliding like a shadow that refused to detach itself from the throne. Her smile was thin, polite, and dripping with calculation. "Captain, investigator," she said. "Her Majesty requests immediate updates on your review. Time is sensitive. We are in the middle of questioning." Ms. Dane replied without rising, "And I am here to ensure those questions remain." "Appropriate," Morell said. Her eyes slid toward Rowan for a brief second, assessing him like a puzzle piece that refused to fit her design. Rowan kept his expression as immovable as stone. He knew exactly what her presence meant. Someone wanted control of the narrative before truth could root itself. "Ms. Dane returned to her tablet. "Sergeant, I will ask directly, did anyone else speak to the princess before she approached you?" Rowan replayed the moment. Queen Corinna stood 10 paces to her left. Lady Morell stood near her. A steward adjusted a chair near the steps. No one else spoke to Her Highness immediately before the whisper. Morel's eyes sharpened. "Are you implying that the injury occurred in public view, Sergeant?" Rowan met her gaze calmly. "I am stating what I observed. Nothing more." Morel stepped closer. "Children bruise easily. She often plays rough with her cousins. You reacted with unnecessary intensity." Rowan did not flinch. "Children also do not whisper SOS unless they believe they require help." Silence. Heavy. Slicing Ms. Dane straightened slightly, as though she recognized a line was forming between truth and politics, before she could speak again. A soft chime sounded on her tablet. She glanced down, eyes scanning the notification. Her brows lifted very slightly. "Captain Elridge," she said, "medical unit has submitted early findings." All three turned toward her. Even Lady Morel's breath paused. "Ms.?" Dane read quietly, then looked up. "Preliminary examination confirms that the bruise on Princess Charlotte's arm is unlikely to be accidental. The medic notes distinct pressure patterns consistent with a grip applied with force." Rowan felt his heartbeat steady. He had not been wrong. Captain Elridge stood straighter. "Was the princess asked how she received the injury?" "She was," Ms. Dane answered. She said only one clear sentence. She lifted her eyes from the screen. Voice steady, precise, and unmistakably serious. She said, "I told the guard because I could not tell her." The room chilled. Morel froze, expression rigid for the first time. Rowan felt a slow, deep certainty settle over him. Someone had hurt the princess. Someone she could not speak against. And the palace was about to split wide open. Ms. Dane closed the tablet with a quiet click. "We continue the investigation," she said. "But one thing is already clear." She turned to Rowan and spoke with firm, crisp authority. "Sergeant Thorne, your decision to activate Code Silver was correct." Lady Morel inhaled sharply as if the kingdom itself had just slipped out of her hand. Outside the office, the palace walls creaked softly. Holding their breath for what would come next, the palace often pretended to be silent, grand, dignified. Composed, but anyone who lived inside its stone corridors knew that it breathed like a living creature. Every whisper found an echo. Every secret pressed against the walls until someone either uncovered it or buried it. On the afternoon of the Code Silver incident, Highcrest Palace breathed heavily. Staff hurried through service corridors with wide eyes. Advisors exchanged tense glances. No one spoke openly, but the air itself carried the weight of fear and speculation. A princess had whispered SOS. A royal guard had answered. And a question that no one dared say aloud coiled through every hallway. Who had she been afraid of? In the medical suite, Princess Charlotte sat on a cushioned bench with Dr. Lena Vale beside her. The room smelled of lavender, an attempt to make it feel less clinical. Her tiny boots did not reach the floor. She swung them slowly as she stared at the band around her upper arm, cooling gel wrapped in soft cloth. "Does it hurt?" Dr. Vale asked gently. Charlotte shook her head. "Not much now." "You're very brave," Dr. Vale said. "Thank you for telling us you needed help." Charlotte did not look up. "I did not want to make trouble." The medic paused. Sometimes keeping quiet creates more trouble than speaking. Charlotte's fingers twisted around the hem of her dress. She finally whispered, "I did not want her to be angry again." Dr. Vale's heartbeat quickened, but she kept her face steady. "Who do you mean, sweetheart?" Before Charlotte could answer, the suite door opened. A palisade hurried in. "Her Majesty requests immediate access to the princess. No exceptions." Dr. Vale stood. "Medical protocol requires a private environment until the examination concludes." That includes the aide's gaze flicked nervously toward the door behind him. "Those are her orders." Dr. Vale exhaled slowly and crouched to Charlotte's eye level. "You may speak with the Queen if you feel comfortable, but I will stay right beside you." "Understand?" Charlotte nodded, though her eyes dimmed. Moments later, Queen Karenna entered the room with Lady Morel gliding at her side like a second shadow. The Queen's expression was soft enough to fool anyone who did not know the difference between affection and calculation. "Oh, my dear girl," Karenna murmured as she approached. "What is all this fuss?" Charlotte's back stiffened. She looked not at the Queen, but at the floor. Dr. Vale stood slightly between them, not fully blocking, but not stepping aside either. Your Majesty, the princess needs rest. I ask that all questions be brief. The queen smiled, a thin smile that did not dispute, but did not yield.
Charlotte, she said, kneeling gracefully, I heard you were hurt.
Why did you not come to me? The little princess swallowed. Rowan's voice echoed in her memory. You are safe now. She wished she could believe that. Her hands tightened into fists. I did not want to interrupt your meeting, she whispered. Lady Morell stepped closer, voice smooth as polished glass. Poor thing. You must have bumped into something without realizing. It happens all the time. Charlotte's breath caught. Not because of the words, but because they were the same ones she had heard earlier in the morning in a quieter hallway. Spoken with irritation, not gentleness. You bumped into something? Stop fussing. Dr. Vale noticed the flicker of fear across Charlotte's face. Your Majesty, she said, the bruise does not appear accidental. It will require documentation. The Queen's smile remained, but her eyes hardened. Documentation is unnecessary. Children fall. Guards overreact. We must remain calm. Dr. Vale did not answer. The Queen rose. Come, Morell. We must manage the courtyard situation before the press asks questions. As they left, Lady Morell kept her gaze fixed on Charlotte until the door closed. Dr. Vale knelt again. Sweetheart, is there something you want to tell me? Charlotte opened her mouth, but a soft knock interrupted them. A security officer stepped in. Dr. Vale, Sergeant Thorne has been asked to submit to full protocol review. He is waiting in the observation suite. He requested permission to speak to the princess only for reassurance. He will respect your judgment. Charlotte lifted her head for the first time. Rowan wants to see me? Dr. Vale softened. Yes, but only if you want that. Charlotte nodded quickly, nervous but hopeful. The observation suite was quiet and dimly lit with warm lamps. Rohan sat on a plain bench. No armor, no rifle. No helmet, just a man in a navy undershirt and uniform trousers, hands clasped together. When the door opened, he stood instantly. Dr. Vale and the security officer remained near the exit. Charlotte walked in gently, her injury wrapped now in white cloth. Rowan knelt so they were eye level. You are safe, he said again. His voice held the same steady strength as before. No matter what happens, you did the right thing. Charlotte's eyes shimmered. Will I be in trouble because I said SOS? Never, Rowan said. A person is never wrong for asking for help. She hesitated. Will you be in trouble? Rowan smiled faintly. I cannot control the decisions others make, but I can tell you something true. I am proud that you trusted me. Charlotte stepped forward and hugged him before she realized she had moved. Rowan froze, not out of discomfort, but out of the deep honor of it. He placed one hand lightly on her back, careful not to break protocol entirely. Dr. Vale looked away to give them dignity. When Charlotte stepped back, she whispered, I did not fall. I did not bump anything. Someone grabbed me because I would not walk faster. Rowan felt the world sharpen into cold clarity. He did not look at Dr. Vale, but she heard the words and recorded them mentally. Can you tell me who? Rowan asked. Charlotte nodded slowly. Her lips parted, and then the door burst open. Queen Corinna. Lady Morell and two royal advisors stood there with expressions dark as thunder. That is enough, Corinna said sharply. This conversation ends now. Her tone was not grandmotherly. It carried authority sharp enough to cut stone. Dr. Vale stepped forward. Your Majesty, the princess, voluntarily silence, the Queen snapped. You overstep. Lady Morell's eyes locked onto Rowan. Sergeant, you are hereby ordered to cease all interaction with the princess until the investigation concludes. Rowan stood slowly. Charlotte clung to the wrap on her arm, eyes wide with fear again. He took one small breath. Steadying his voice, With respect, Your Majesty, Rowan said quietly but firmly. The child was speaking freely. Corinna stepped closer. The perfume on her sleeves carried the sharpness of roses and something colder. You forget your place, Sergeant, she said. Your job is obedience, not interpretation. Rowan held her gaze. My job is protection, and I will follow that duty. Morel stepped in front of the queen. Remove him from the suite, she ordered the guards. Now, 2 palace guards closed in from behind Rowan. They did not grab him. Protocol still mattered, but their presence made the meaning clear. Charlotte took a step forward. Please do not take him, she said softly. Her voice cracked. The queen's jaw tightened. Come here, Charlotte. Charlotte did not move. That hesitation, small, fragile, powerful, told everyone in the room exactly where her trust lay. Lady Morel's eyes flickered with irritation.
Tingulation.
Something dangerous took shape behind her smile. As of this moment, Morel said, Sergeant Rowan Thorne is suspended pending disciplinary action. The guards stepped closer. Rowan did not resist. Charlotte's breathing quickened. She looked between Rowan, the queen, and the door, and then, with courage far larger than her small frame, she shouted, No, he helped me. He helped me because she, the rest of her sentence, was smothered by the queen's sharp command. Enough. The force of that word froze Charlotte mid-breath. Dr. Vale moved instantly to the princess's side. Your Majesty, she is frightened. That is enough for today. Remove him, Morel repeated calmly. The guards escorted Rowan toward the door. As he left, he looked back once. Not for the queen, not for the advisors. Only for the child who had whispered SOS. Her eyes told him everything he needed to know. She trusted him more than anyone in the palace, and she was still in danger as the door shut behind him. Rowan understood something with absolute clarity. This was no longer about protocol. This was no longer about politics. A child needed protection, and the truth behind her bruise could shake the kingdom itself, whatever the palace decided to do next. Rowan Thorne would not step back. He had taken his stand. He would not abandon it now. There were many rooms inside Highcrest Palace that the public never knew about. Rooms without portraits, without gold leaf, without polished marble. Rooms designed not for display, but for control. Sergeant Rowan Thorne now sat in one of them. The disciplinary review chamber was small, windowless, and built of stone so thick that even raised voices barely traveled. A single table stood at the center with 2 chairs on either side. The lighting hummed quietly above his head. The air carried the faint scent of old dust and cold metal. He was not restrained. He was not formally arrested, but he was not free. On the table before him lay a document folder. Its cover read Preliminary Misconduct Report. Silver Protocol Incident. Misconduct. He felt the word like a dull bruise beneath the ribs. He rubbed his palms against his trousers, steadying himself. Whatever this room was meant to do, intimidate, isolate, unsettle it, would not shake his conviction. A small security camera blinked red in the upper corner. Someone was always watching. The door clicked open. Captain Elridge entered first, rigid and troubled. Behind him came Ms. Priya Dane, tablet in hand. Last to enter was Sir Alden Briar, Chief of Palace Discipline, elderly man with thinning hair, a stiff gait, and the expression of someone who believed every problem could be resolved with the right paperwork. Sergeant Thorne.
Alden?
Sir Alden began. Settling into the chair opposite him, we will conduct a formal review of your actions this morning. Answer clearly, factually, and without emotional inference. Rowan nodded once. Understood, sir? Captain Elridge stood near the wall, arms behind his back. He looked conflicted, caught between supporting his guard and obeying the chain of command. Ms. Dane opened the file. Sergeant, we will begin by reviewing the sequence of events that followed your suspension. Rowan held still, waiting. After you were escorted from the observation suite, she continued, the princess was placed under the temporary care of her grandmother and Lady Morel. A statement from Her Majesty suggests that the bruise may have come from a fall earlier in the morning. Rowan felt his jaw tighten. That does not align with what I saw. It also does not align with the medical findings, Ms. Dane said calmly. Then she glanced at Sir Alden. However, The palace has requested that we review all possibilities before drawing conclusions. Sir Alden cleared his throat with authority. Sergeant Thorne, you acted without clearance. You raised your voice in a royal courtyard. You disrupted a scheduled rehearsal. And you undermined the appearance of stability surrounding the royal family. Rowan met the man's gaze. If the princess used the distress code, sir, protocol dictates immediate action. That is under interpretation, Sir Alden replied. Silver protocol requires clear, repeated verification. That is not what the manual says, Rowan said evenly. Captain Elridge finally spoke. Sir Alden, with respect, the manual states that any use of the distress code by a minor triggers an immediate safety response. Verification happens after stabilizing the child. A tense silence followed. Sir Alden's lips thinned. Miss Dane gently interjected. Sergeant Thorne, the princess attempted to speak before she was interrupted. Would you have acted differently had she been allowed to finish? No, Rowan answered, because she already said enough. And what, exactly, did you believe she meant? Rowan spoke without hesitation. That someone in her immediate environment had harmed her, and that she felt unsafe, speaking openly. Sir Alden frowned. That is speculation. That is observation, Rowan corrected. Before the argument could continue, the chamber door suddenly opened. A young palace guard stepped in, flushed and out of breath. Surgeon message from medical unit. Ms. Dane stood instantly. Read it. The guard held up a tablet. Dr. Vale has filed a confidential statement. She insists it be added to the disciplinary review immediately. Sir Alden sighed. Very well. The guard cleared his throat and read aloud. During private examination, Princess Charlotte displayed fear responses when questioned about her morning routine. She indirectly identified the source of her injury as being an adult she could not say no. 2. Evidence suggests the injury was intentional. Captain Elridge's expression darkened. Ms. Dane's eyes sharpened. Sir Alden's pen froze midway through a line. Rowan felt his breath leave him in a slow, controlled exhale. The guard continued, voice trembling with the weight of the words. Dr. Vale requests that child protective measures be extended beyond routine procedure. She believes the princess may be at risk. Silence fell like a stone. Sir Alden slowly set his pen down. This is unverified, he muttered weakly. The child may be confused. Children misremember events. Miss Dane rounded on him sharply. Children do not bruise themselves in patterns that match restraint, and they do not whisper distress codes unless they mean them. Elridge spoke next, tone iron steady. Sir Alden, this is no longer a matter of discipline. It is a matter of security. Sir Alden opened his mouth to object, but the chamber door opened once more. Lady Morell stood in the doorway, hands clasped elegantly, expression unreadable. Behind her, 2 additional advisors hovered cautiously, as though they did not wish to breathe too loudly. Well? She asked smoothly. Has the review concluded? Ms. Dane stepped forward before Sir Alden could answer. No. In fact, new evidence requires us to suspend the disciplinary proceedings until a full safeguarding investigation is complete. Lady Morell's smile did not move her eyes. Unnecessary. The Queen prefers to handle this internally. That is improper, Ms. Dane replied sharply. The safety of a minor is not managed by political preference. Morell's gaze turned polar cold. Investigator Dane, do not overstep the authority of the Crown. Rowan rose to his feet. With respect, Lady Morell, the authority of the Crown is meant to protect the vulnerable, not silence them. She turned her head toward him slowly. Sergeant Thorne, you misunderstand your role. No, Rowan said quietly. I finally understand it correctly. Morell took one step closer. Your actions have created unnecessary drama. You have embarrassed Her Majesty. You have planted seeds of mistrust in the public image of this family. And you have interfered with matters above your rank. Rowan did not blink. The princess was hurt. Morell's voice dropped into a low, chilling register. And you should ask yourself very carefully, Sergeant, who benefits when a story like that becomes public? Ms. Dane stiffened. Is that a warning? Morell smiled thinly. It is an observation. Sir Alden quickly closed the folder, as if fearful the conversation might ignite the paper inside it. "We will reconvene," he said nervously. "This session is now adjourned." Lady Morell inclined her head, then turned and swept out of the room. The advisors followed like nervous birds chasing a predator's shadow. The moment the door shut, Elrich released a breath. He must have been holding for several minutes. Ms. Dane looked to Rowan. Her expression was no longer neutral. It carried resolve. "Sergeant," she said, "you are no longer merely a witness. You are now a key part of a safeguarding investigation." Rowan nodded. "What do I do?" he asked him as Dane answered without hesitation. "You prepare. Things will escalate. The palace will not allow this matter to remain quiet. And whoever hurt the princess will try very hard to make sure you disappear from the story." Captain Elridge stepped forward. "You will not face this alone." Rowan's pulse slowed, steadying like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. Because now this was not uncertainty. This was not doubt. This was truth, and truth had a way of cracking stone, even in palaces. Sergeant Ms. Dane said, "We move to phase 2 of the investigation, which is," Rowan asked, her voice lowered. "We identify the person Princess Charlotte feared." And Rowan, standing tall in the quiet stone room, knew one thing beyond all doubt. Whatever came next, the palace's darkest secrets were just beginning to surface. The evening sky over Highcrest Palace shifted into deep violet, the last gold rays melting behind the stone towers. Shadows stretched across the courtyards like long fingers, reaching through arches and corridors. Inside the palace, silence did not mean peace. It meant pressure. It meant fear tightening around truth like a closing fist. Sergeant Rowan Thorne walked beside Captain Elridge through a restricted hallway lined with portraits of past monarchs. Their eyes seemed to follow him, judging him, questioning him, reminding him of the tradition he had just challenged. But Rowan walked without hesitation. The decision he had made in the courtyard could not be undone. He had chosen the child over the crown. He had chosen conscience over tradition. They reached the safeguarding command suite, a hidden cluster of rooms reserved for crisis situations. Inside, Investigator Priya Dane stood before a large screen filled with documents, schedule logs, and maps of the palace interior. Dr. Lena Vale was present also, her arms folded protectively as she waited for the meeting to begin. Rowan closed the door behind him. Ms. Dane turned. "We are ready to begin." Captain Elridge nodded. "Let us move quickly. Every minute that passes makes this more dangerous." Rowan stepped forward. "What have we learned?" Priya Dane tapped her tablet, and the central screen shifted to a timeline labeled Morning Movements, Princess Charlotte. Charlotte's day began at 7:15, she said. She ate breakfast with her older brothers in the East Dining Chamber. At 7:40, she was escorted to the study room for rehearsal preparation. Dr. Vale moved closer to the screen. Between 8 and 8:20, her schedule shows a costume fitting in the green room. Rowan frowned. Was she alone? No, Priya answered. The green room morning check included one seamstress, one steward, and one supervising adult assigned by the Queen for the rehearsal. Captain Elridge spoke quietly. Who is the supervisor? Priya touched the screen again. A name appeared. Lady Morell Ashford. Rowan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He had suspected it, but seeing her name connected to the princess during that exact time frame made the truth pulse through the room like a warning signal. Priya continued. At 8:23, Charlotte left the green room. At 8:27, she was seen entering the courtyard with visible tension in her posture. Less than 15 minutes later, she approached Sergeant Thorne and used the distress code. Dr. Vale crossed her arms. The bruise pattern matches a hand grip from an adult. The pressure was applied deliberately. Elridge looked at Rowan. This places Lady Morell in the room with the princess at the most likely moment of injury. And based on the princess's own words, I could not tell her the fear was directed at a woman in authority. Charlotte is rarely alone with the Queen. Lady Morell, however, oversees her wardrobe, her protocol training, and occasionally supervises her during events. Rowan breathed out slowly. Charlotte trusted me enough to whisper SOS. That means she believed someone else would ignore her, or punish her. Dr. Vale lowered her voice. Lady Morell has a reputation for strictness behind closed doors. She prides herself on discipline. I have heard staff whisper that she is not gentle when she believes a child is misbehaving. Ms. Dane turned from the screen. Then let me ask the question we have all been circling. Silence thickened the air. Then she said it. Did Lady Morell harm the princess? The words echoed around the room. Captain Elridge replied first. The evidence points that way. Rohan clenched his jaw. And someone is trying to keep it quiet. Priya nodded. The Queen shut down our investigation the moment she realized where it was leading. She may be trying to protect her advisor, or protect the palace from scandal. Rowan's voice remained steady. A scandal is not more important than a child. Priya looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and gravity. That is why we need you now. Rohan straightened. What must I do? Priya lifted a secure file. You will accompany us as a primary witness to present our report to the Internal Royal Council. This must go before the highest neutral authority. We cannot allow Lady Morell or the Queen to intercept it. Elridge placed a hand on Rowan's shoulder. When we walk into that council chamber, we will face pressure unlike anything you have experienced. But you must not yield. Rohan nodded once. I will not. Dr. Vale stepped closer. Before you go, there is something you should hear. She lifted a small device, a secure audio recorder. This contains a privately recorded statement from the princess. She gave it voluntarily once she felt safe with me. Dr. Vale pressed play. Charlotte's soft voice filled the room. I did not want to walk faster. Lady Morell grabbed me here. A small pause. She told me to smile, or she would be very disappointed. She squeezed my arm and said no one would believe me if I said anything. I was scared. But the guard believed me. Please tell him thank you. The recording ended. Rowan closed his eyes. The princess had spoken clearly, bravely, and she had thanked him in that moment. All doubt fell away. He opened his eyes again, and the determination within them was unshakable. No child should fear the person who is meant to guide them, he said quietly. And no truth should die in silence to protect an adult's pride. Priya Dane closed the recorder. Then let us go to the council. The Internal Royal Council chamber was a round room lined with stone pillars and velvet curtains. 10 council members sat behind a curved table. Guards lined the walls. Queen Corinna was not present by rule. She could not attend investigations concerning herself or her staff. Lady Morell, however, stood at the far end of the room. Arms clasped, expression calm and poised. When Rowan entered with Priya, Elridge, and Dr. Vale, Morell's gaze snapped to him, cold, calculating. Threat disguised as grace. The council chairperson lifted a hand. Let the session begin. Priya Dane stepped forward and placed the secure folder on the table. We present evidence of potential harm done to Princess Charlotte by Lady Morell Ashford, including medical analysis, timeline verification, and official recorded statement from the princess. Gasps rippled through the council. Lady Morell's face changed only slightly, but enough. Control slipped. Rowan stepped forward as Priya gestured for him to speak. He took a slow breath. I am Sergeant Rowan Thorne of the Royal Guard. I acted because a child asked for help. I acted because duty without conscience is not duty at all. And I stand by every choice I made to protect Princess Charlotte. Lady Morell lifted her chin. This is an outrageous fabrication. A child's bruise means nothing. And this guard seeks attention. Rowan met her eyes steadily. I seek only truth. Priya spoke sharply. Play the recording. Dr. Vale placed the device on the council table. Charlotte's voice echoed through the chamber. The words fell like stones in still water. The effect was instant and devastating. Lady Morell's face drained of its controlled composure when the recording ended. Not a single person in the chamber moved. The council chairperson leaned forward. Lady Morell Ashford, you are hereby removed from all royal duties pending a full investigation. Guards stepped forward. For the first time, Lady Morel's mask cracked fully. "You have no idea what you are doing," she snapped. "The Queen will not allow this," Priya answered calmly. "The Queen does not overrule safeguarding law." Rowan watched as Morel was escorted from the room. He felt no triumph, only relief. In the beginning of healing, hours later, Rowan stood once more in the courtyard, where everything had begun. The air felt lighter now, peaceful. A small set of footsteps approached. Princess Charlotte walked across the stones, her arms still wrapped, but her smile returning small, genuine, hopeful. Dr. Vale walked with her. At a respectful distance, Charlotte stopped before Rowan. She looked up at him with the quiet strength that only truth can give. "Thank you," she whispered. Rowan knelt, so their eyes were level. "You were brave. You protected yourself with one small word." Charlotte shook her head. "I was not brave alone." Rowan smiled gently. "Bravery grows when someone listens, and you were heard." She reached out and placed her small hand in his. "I am not afraid anymore," she said. Rowan felt something warm settle in his chest. A victory not for him, but for her. For every child who needed someone strong enough to stand up, even against a palace. He bowed his head not as a guard, but as a protector, honoring the courage of a child. "Your Highness," he said softly, "you will never be alone again." Above them, the bells of Highcrest chimed. The palace breathed differently, now lighter, freer, no longer crushing truth beneath stone, and the kingdom would remember this day not for scandal, not for conflict, but for the quiet moment when a princess whispered SOS, and a guard listened.